Hello and welcome to episode 141 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. I finally come clean this week about a secret I've been keeping for 2 months. And no, I'm not pregnant. And yes, I would make an excellent mother.
The city of Houston is under a boil water advisory because of power outages. Everything is bigger in Texas, including grid problems.
The Tesla Semi completed a 500-mile journey with a load weighing 81,000 pounds, or roughly half the weight of Elon Musk's Eagle.
The upcoming Sizewell C nuclear power plant in the UK was in need of funding. Ultra-wealthy Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has stepped in with a cash infusion. Oh, wait, I'm being told it's taxpayer money. He's not an idiot.
All that and hopefully more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. Brian, I'm sweating like a hog, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I'm not sick. I was shoveling the driveway because it blew in. Yeah. And before the show, I frantically tracked down a plug-in electric snowblower. Had my partner was coming home for lunch, and I said, "Can you swing by the Walmart because there's one left?" It was like $100 less than. You know, if I made this decision a few days ago, I would have had all the Cyber Monday, Black Friday deals. But I missed out on that. But I found one with specs that was really good. Now I've got a battery-operated snow shovel. Not cutting it. Not cutting it for. You know what's going to happen now is we're going to get trace amounts of snow for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
But I say fine. It's worth spending the money for that to happen because, you know, it's worth it. I can't. We've been snowed in, and my partner had to park on the street, and the driveway was daunting. So I quickly assembled it at lunchtime while you were having your happy nap.
Yeah.
And I went out there with a short extension cord and did what I could. And now I'm sweating like a crazy. I'm soaked in sweat because my heart was going maximum, which, you know, doesn't take much these days. But, you know, when you're doing anything clearing snow, it gets the heart rate going, unfortunately.
So like a plug-in kind rather than battery operated, I guess, is a lot cheaper.
It is cheaper. I did splurge, though, and get pretty much the most powerful one you can get. It's about 14 amps. You can get a 15 amp one. But then you have problems with your extension cords overheating and blowing breakers and things.
Right.
It's kind of the maximum that it'll handle on an ongoing basis. But I went out there with, I would say, a 15-inch drift and went right through it. Like it does a foot of snow, but it will go under the drift and it will still keep going under the drift. Wow. And you just go over it a second time. So yeah, I'm happy with it. Those are a pain in the ass. I've had them before because of the extension cord, but I knew that I wanted power, and this was a bigger unit, and it was a couple $140, and I couldn't really afford it, but I said, man, you know, because we got to clean the sidewalks this year by city bylaw.
City bylaw, yeah. Well, just a quick update. Last week I was complaining about GoComics.com, this website I go to every day to read daily comic strip. It was down for a full 5 days and finally came back online. They offered no explanation of exactly what happened. It was supposedly a cybersecurity issue, which I had read on another website. But anyway, our long nightmare is over. It's back. And coincidentally, this week on Saturday, it was Charles Schulz's, what would have been his 100th birthday, the creator of the Peanuts comic strip, the legend of newspaper comic strips. It was his 100th birthday, so a lot of the comic strips had special tributes to him on Saturday. So that was a lot of fun to read. All the cartoonists got together and decided to do that. And then the last thing on comic strips, do you remember the soap opera comic strips when you were a kid? There were always a couple of comic strips that were not funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, give me an example of one, can you?
Well, there's two main ones, Mary Worth and Rex Morgan, MD. And these strips have both been around for like 100 years by this point. Anyway, I started reading them a couple of months ago because I was, looking for new exciting things to follow. And I'd always avoided them like the plague when I was a kid because it's like, well, this is ridiculous. There's no joke here. What's the point of this? Anyway, I've been reading it for a couple of months now, and I'm starting to get into it. It's kind of fun.
I'm a bit speechless here. You're reading soap opera comic strips after resisting them your whole life?
My whole life. I mean, I thought, well,
Is it a gossipy pleasure, man? What's going on here?
Yeah, I don't know. I like comic strips, and there's not enough good ones. So I've just been just been looking to expand my horizons.
What happened to the creators? Did their kids take over? I mean, if these are 100 years old.
Yeah, often that is the case. I don't think that's the case with Mary Worth or Rex Morgan, but yeah, often it's passed on to a son or a daughter or a nephew or a niece or something. It's a I don't know. They've all been around now, a lot of them, for 100 years. I don't know. It's a weird thing.
All right, Brian, I've got an announcement to make. I've been hiding something from you for 2 months.
Wow.
You and the listeners.
Wow.
And it is regarding my LEAF.
Oh, yeah.
My LEAF has major problems.
Uh-oh.
It happened just before we recorded a show about 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so distraught, I couldn't bring it up. And I couldn't bring it up for 2 months. I was just so unhappy about it.
Oh, that's terrible.
I don't know how the hell I made it through that episode, but if you can find a very glum James about 2 months ago trying to struggle through an episode, I guess it's all muscle memory. That's how we've been done so many of these shows already.
Yeah. And, also it, doesn't have to be that good. So.
No, I mean, well, we try. I mean, we do try for our listeners, don't we?
But hey, every week, a good show. Come on.
Okay. So now I know that we have a lot of longtime listeners, but we also have a lot of new listeners. And I wanted to just talk about electric cars with you for a little while about their reliability. And I don't want to just jump into it without talking about what model I have, because it's going to probably be different than what you are considering. Although a friend of ours texted me the other night and was asking me about the LEAF, wanting to buy one. And I said, well, here's what happened, and you can make up your own mind. What had happened is my 2013 Nissan LEAF. Now, remember, this is the first mass-produced all-electric car by a car company. They started making them at the end of 2010, and they made them for a couple of years in Japan, and then they opened up a Tennessee factory and one in the UK as well. Mine comes from Tennessee, and it comes from the United States and was imported into Canada. So, there's a few little things like daytime running lights that had to be added and a bigger washer tank for some reason. Yeah. It's just one of those weird things, just to get up to Canadian standards. So it was imported already. And in Quebec, the province of Quebec, they had just terminated at that time, but they had incentives for used vehicles. So that lowered the used market for LEAFs. And that's how I got one as cheap as I did. It was about $10,000 and change. And that was a pretty good price at the time, but it was a base model. So it was the base Model S. It had no cruise control. And just when they started making those models, they put a heat pump in them in the upper trim levels. They had 3 trim levels. I had the low one. So I didn't even have a fast charger on mine or, a reverse camera or, there was some things I gave up to get a really cheap one because, everyone was desiring the other ones. Had I gotten one that was one of the other trim levels, I would have had a heat pump and a PTC heater. PTC heater is basically like a toaster. Yeah. Now, these suckers in electric cars heat up fast. They connect right to the high voltage battery, and they, it's basically it's a heater that gets red hot and air blows through it. So you have instant heat in your car, which is wonderful. And when I preheat my car in the wintertime, even in -40, I'll get into it and it feels like a toaster oven. It just feels hot and dry and completely warm and habitable in there. It's a wonderful feeling.
If you leave it long enough, it'll melt all the snow that's on the car too.
Right. And that's what I do. So in the LEAF, it will pre-program itself. You just give it a departure time. And based on the weather and how long it took to get to temperature in previous days, it will add more time. I think up to 2 hours. I'm not sure about that. So I probably abused it. And I lost my PTC heater. So I have no heater in the car for 2 months now. A month ago, you were talking about getting your heater replaced under warranty. Which I did. Went up to Saskatoon, and they replaced that under warranty. And it was the same thing. Your car and mine are the same in that sense that they just have a PTC heater. Yep. The later models may have had both, or at least a heat pump in yours. Yep. For more efficiency. A heat pump is like a reverse air conditioner if you're new to the show, and it works a lot more because a great deal of power goes into these. I think 5,000 watts goes into mine. So that's more than the car driving. So your range goes down. So since my heater broke, my winter range is excellent, by the way. I bet. Yeah. It only goes down based on denser or cold air. And do you have a little bonfire going in there or something? No. I eat some beans sometimes before. It's not a great experience. No. And what I've done Yeah, I mean, we have an SUV that initially I thought I would just plate the SUV for the winter, and it's going to be expensive and it'll heat up and it'll be,
Yeah.
But then even without the damn heater, Brian, I just love that bloody car. Like, I
Yeah,
just love it. I just love driving it. I hate getting into the Prius, which is a combustion engine in the wintertime. It's cold anyway. Unless your destination is a long ways away or you've warmed it up, that thing takes a while to warm up too. And it's not like an electric car. So, and it just doesn't feel the same as an electric car. And I finally got the wheel bearings fixed. So it was nice and quiet. And I've decided that one of the great things about electric cars is after I had my wheel bearing fixed because they were very loud, is when you get up to speed in the city, it's almost like you could feel the wind in your hair. Like you could just feel and hear the wind and nothing else. And it's just such an exhilarating feeling to just hear that. And there's something, I don't know, just beyond anything a gas car can do. When I looked at I looked at yours was covered under warranty. I found somebody who spent $1,200 in Canada basically to do it. And the part was about $600 or $700 for the part. And then they did some labor. Now in the LEAF, I looked at doing it myself, but it's very complicated. Basically the whole inside of the car has to be taken apart, and it's a $4,000 job in most cases.
Oh no.
So yeah, I spent 10 on the car. I just spent 2,100 that I didn't have fixing the front wheel hubs.
Yeah.
Which cost way more than they should have because I got screwed by a local shop because there's no Nissan dealer here to fix it. I also need some front suspension work. Now the car is 1 month short of 10 years old.
Yeah.
This is something important because we're talking about electric cars not needing maintenance. And that is true for the most part. And people say, well, it's electric car, something weird can go wrong in it. Well, I guess this is it. I mean, aside from the battery, which are covered under 8-year warranties, always, there's the charger, I suppose, could go in the car, that there's a built-in charger that could wear out over time. I would have to worry about that. I could have some bad battery cells. So you might have to replace some modules at some point. But, the cars would have been great. But, some people put in diesel heaters. Like there's a guy in Swift Current who bought a brand new F-150 pickup truck, and he put in a diesel heater so that he wouldn't lose any range. Like brand new.
A diesel heater in an electric truck.
That's right. It's basically this unit that you have to exhaust, and it just kind of burns away.
That's crazy.
It is crazy, and it's got electronic controls. This is what people are doing, and I don't know.
Well, did you ever know somebody who had a really old Volkswagen Beetle? Because I think like some of those had a propane heater because the Volkswagen Beetles were air-cooled, so you don't get that circulating fluid that you normally use for your heater in your car. So old Beetles had a propane heater, which often apparently also did not work. So yeah, I knew a guy who had to drive around in the winter in a Beetle, scraping the inside of the window because there was no heat.
Well, here's what I've done. Okay, first of all, let's, the part, it wouldn't be so bad if I was a Tesla out of warranty. $1,200 to go from an unusable car to a usable car. Great. Yeah. I actually put in a space heater, like the ones you have at the cottage.
Yeah.
Into my car on a timer.
Oh yeah. With a little, does it plug into the lighter?
No, it plugs into an extension cord.
Oh, okay. So you just run an extension cord in there.
Because when I was a kid, my parents had in their car a block heater. Yeah. Now, kids, if you're a lot of people listening don't know what a block heater is. That is a heater that heats the oil in a car in a very cold climate so that it will turn over, that it's viscous enough to turn over.
And we have them in all of our cars here. But yeah, my parents also had an interior warmer as well. And you plugged it in with the block heater.
Yes, that's what my parents did.
Yeah. And so same thing, like you can have your car warm in the morning.
I seem to remember it running overnight. Do you remember if it ran constantly?
I think my parents did that too. Just left both the heater and the interior one plugged in overnight. Yeah.
Different times because it would have been like 1,000 watts probably.
Yeah. It would have been extremely wasteful. Yeah.
And for what? I mean, I don't remember the snow being melted on the windows, That's not something that I remember.
Yeah, no, I know somebody who used to do that, lived in an apartment building where the plugins in the parking lot were free. Like you didn't have to pay for the electricity.
Oh.
So
Sweet.
I know somebody who did that, kept it plugged in all night, and just all the snow melted on the car.
Nice.
Just because he didn't have to pay for the electricity.
It is warming up the interior and at least getting it usable. Now, the problem is you have to run some air on the window to defog it at the lowest setting. And if it's cold out, that feels really bad. Because we're talking, what temperatures have we had here? -10 Celsius.
Yeah, -20.
And it's going to get colder. It's going to be a high of -20 in a few days. I was hoping for an unnaturally warm winter. And a lottery ticket win. A couple of the things that I was hoping for. And if I got it fixed, I would have to ship the car all the way up to a city called Prince Albert, which is the closest Nissan dealer that is certified to do electrical work.
Yeah.
And, so basically when people do these fixes, they take out the front car seats and all the dash, and they have to unplug the high voltage system underneath the car. And there's also this fuse that is hard to get at that always blows. I confirmed it because I have the computer connection to my phone app, and it has the right error codes on there so that the heater is.
So you know the problem.
Now, I knew this is something that I worried about because I'd seen it with other people. I'd seen it online a few times, but now that I'm really looking, I haven't seen it that much at all. Like there's a few references to it, and there's people saying, well, it was bad welding, and there should be a class action suit, but there really isn't that many people. I think a lot of people actually had them done under warranty because I'm only a couple of years off the warranty actually. Well, that's not true. I don't know if this would have qualified for that, but a lot of the high voltage stuff did, and the battery and stuff like that. So I'm very depressed, Brian, because, and I haven't even told my partner yet. My kids know. My partner does not. She just thinks I spilled something in the car and I've got a heater going in there. I'm just so ashamed of myself because I'm an electric car advocate. I've been telling everybody they don't break down, and I put my family at risk of this. And, it's now we don't have a car that's working. So I drive my kid to school. It's a 10-minute drive. She doesn't complain.
Well, I don't know if this makes you feel any better. And you've certainly told me this as well. Like, you crunched the numbers when you bought that car, and it's basically probably already paid for itself if you think of all the fuel that you've saved. So,
and that was on old numbers. That was before gas went up.
Before gas went up. So first of all, the car has been free so far, basically.
Yes. Another way I could look at it is that these things are selling for $6,000 more than I paid for it.
Yeah, prices are up since when you bought it,
So there's that incentive to fix it and not feel so bad about it.
Or sell it to somebody in the summer.
No, well, I would never do that. Never. That would be awful.
Well, now that the evidence is on the podcast,
by the way,
you can't.
Here's a tip for you kids out there. If you buy an electric car in the summer that's used, check the heater. Just because, you want to make sure it works. Now, if I had one of those models that wasn't the base model, I would have had, in my case, a heat pump and a PTC heater. Yeah. So the heat pump, I don't know what they work efficiently at in a Leaf. It might only be -15 or something like that. And it gets much colder where we are. But I would have had some heat, and I could have preheated it for a couple of hours, and it would have got...
Could have made it work,
somewhat comfortable in there, and that would have been fine maybe. Not on every day, but on most of our winter days aren't necessarily brutal. But hopefully it would work out. I don't know.
Warm days are only 5 months away.
Shut up. I can't. It can't be that long. There's heated seats front and back in the Prius, and the Leaf. That helps. Yeah. There's a heated steering wheel.
That's great.
Now, I've ordered off of Amazon for $30 a dinky little electric, cigarette lighter heated defroster. So I will see how that works. It's going to come in a couple of days. I'll tell you next week if it does anything. I had one many years ago when I was a teenager because my rear defrost didn't work.
Oh, yeah.
My $300 car. So I bought one at the hardware store, and I think it sort of did something.
So it's a little portable heater, like just 100 watts or something?
Just a cheap, about 100 watts. But hopefully it'll be better than just blowing cold air as far as the feeling of it. But we'll see how I survive actual really cold temperatures that are coming up this week. I may not. And you know how teenage girls dress for school. Like she doesn't my daughter doesn't dress very warm to get her into school. And even with the car not producing heat, I'm trying to convince her to put things on so she doesn't get hypothermia. But on the bright side, Brian, I'm feeling better. And
well, like we were talking about last week, it's we sometimes don't dress for the climate anymore because we're just used to going from one warm environment to another warm environment.
I don't have a lot of stuff this week, because Twitter has gone haywire, and I get a lot of my information from climate people and various activists on Twitter. They've all left for Mastodon and other places. Like they're all completely gone, and I hope they come back. But, there's talk of, Tesla shareholders getting upset with Musk doing what he's doing because that seems to be affecting the Tesla stock. Just the fact that he had to sell a bunch to buy that social media platform is a little crazy. Anyway, I'm on the Chevy Bolt user group. I thought it was interesting. Every now and again, I see an interesting story that really talks about the economics of electric cars. We were talking about how mine, for $10,000, covered the gas in my SUV. That would have been 5 years of gas. And, that's just incredible. And plus, you're saving the environment a little bit, too. You're obviously, it's a lot more pleasurable, too. But so somebody's paying $520 for a Chevy Bolt. This is one of the cheapest EVs you can buy.
The monthly payment for 5 years.
With no money down or anything like that. And he's saying that he saved 175 gallons of gas, and at $4 a gallon minus $60 a month increase in electricity, he's saving $580 a month.
Oh, it says over 2 months.
Over 2 months.
$580 over 2 months.
It's like a free car. It's like getting a car for very little money, and it will basically pay for itself in 8 to 10 years. So in his case, he's buying a brand new car and getting it free after 8 to 10 years.
Yeah, the more you drive, the better deal it is.
Yeah, that's for sure. And as they come down in price, this is going to be more and more a thing. And especially if you're dealing with fleets that do a lot of driving, and, free is one thing, but you're still saving. You're still saving over a gas car. So that's something. The New York Times had an interesting piece about how the Saudis are trying to keep gas alive. And one of the ways that they're doing it is they're buying a whole bunch of EVs and e-buses for Saudi Arabia so that they can, get this, burn less gas. They want to sell the gas to other people. They don't want to waste any of it using it themselves.
That's a really good point.
So they're doing that. Yeah. And that just struck my craw, like it's stuck in there.
Well, there's going to be, sort of EV have countries and EV have not countries. And that's keep selling them your oil, I guess.
So the Texas grid, what's going on there?
Yeah, we talk about that occasionally. Texas in the U.S. has its own electricity grid that tends to be cut off from the rest of the country, and they've had problems lately. And I just thought this was an interesting problem. There's currently, and it should be ending today, but a boil water advisory in the city of Houston, which is a massive city.
For the whole city?
For the whole city. And so school has been canceled yesterday.
That's archaic, Brian. That's First Nation Reserve up north kind of territory, or small town at least.
And it's because they had power outages at their water filtration system. When the power goes out, and they were supposed to have power back up, and for some reason it didn't work, but the water pressure drops within the filtration plant. And once the water pressure drops down past a certain amount, they basically have to put out a boil water advisory. So it's entirely possible the water is still safe to drink.
Just a precautionary thing.
But it's a precautionary thing, and they need to let it go for a couple of days, test the water again, and they will probably lift the boil water advisory today. But I just thought it was interesting because it's just one of those things where we don't think about necessarily in terms of the grid, why it's important to have a reliable grid. And this is just one of those instances where, a bad grid with frequent power outages can lead to things like a boil water advisory for, a massive city like Houston.
These are the things that I worry about with Armageddon scenarios, like if there's some sort of war or something. I mean, we really need to have our water because we don't have a well in our backyard. And I'm not currently collecting rainwater. You're talking about doing that at the cottage, new cottage, but
I guess we could melt some snow during the winter.
Well, yeah, not the yellow
and
stuff.
Boil that.
I'll just blow it into a big pile with my new snowblower and melt it. Melt it with what, though?
Right.
I have to collect firewood on the prairies.
Yeah.
That's no fun. Burn gopher carcasses or something like that. I thought I would also mention this. 2 Chinese companies announced that the production of the largest offshore wind turbine to date has been announced, because this is something we talked about before, so I thought I'd bring it up again.
You love a big turbine.
I do love my turbines to be setting records, Brian, and we knew that this would be broken because there was rumors of it. The previous record is 14 megawatts. This is something that can power a house for 2 days with one rotation of the blade.
That's
one little rotation can power your home and your family for 2 days. And now they've gone up to 16. There's 2 companies in China that have developed 16 megawatts. It's interesting to watch wind professionals have discussions online about what the theoretical limit is, but a lot of times, in the clean energy space, people think that nothing can go any further, and it does. There's always some sort of development or some sort of technique, or and it some of it is just placement, where you place it. They have better modeling now than they used to 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So the groups on November 24th showed off the turbine factory in Fujian province, and the turbine has a 252-meter rotor diameter with 50,000 meter sweep area. That is a large sweep area. If you want to compare sweep areas, it's a large one. 146 meters, the hub of it, the middle. The turning point, 146 meters, 1.5 football fields off the ground.
And I saw another wind turbine blade on the highway the other day.
Did you?
Which is always an amazing sight to see, those gigantic
around here?
Blades. Yeah, it was heading towards Moose Jaw.
That's interesting. I wonder where from. Because that's kind of...
or where it was going, not sure.
That is actually the biggest restriction on this wind turbine size, is that you physically can't turn corners on any sort of roads with those wind turbines. Oh, it was right here you saw one. I saw one in Colorado. It was amazing. It was just blocks long, and it's just, the largest man-made item I think I'd ever seen up close. It was like looking at a massive rocket or something.
Okay, so I've got a great story here from Hannah Ritchie, who is the head of research at Our World in Data, and she is still on Twitter, and I would recommend following her. She's a great follow on Twitter. Amazing information. So she's the head of research at Our World in Data, fabulous website that just collects all kinds of data and presents it in website form. A lot of people have been going there through the COVID pandemic because it's a great place to go for sort of COVID statistics and stuff like that. So she wrote this amazing article at Wired magazine, and it's about processed foods. Every once in a while, people stop me on the street and they say, "Hey, are you that guy from the Clean Energy Show? Why are you promoting processed foods all the time?"
Go on.
The idea of processed food, it just has a really bad rap. Like, we all know, I think, that we should eat, raw vegetables from the garden or whatever, and processed foods can be bad. And it turns out that there's sort of 2 categories. There's processed foods, and then there's ultra processed foods. There's, literally, 2 categories to describe them based on how much processing. It's just a massive oversimplification, and this fantastic article summarizes everything. And it's things that we've basically kind of talked about on the show before, but I just thought the article was great because it really explains it really nicely. So one example of a good instance of processed food would be iodized salt, right?
Why?
So iodine is a thing that we all need in our bodies, and iodine deficiencies used to be a really common problem around the world. And increased risk of stillbirths and miscarriages, reductions in IQ from lack of iodine.
That's why I'm so smart. All the processed foods I've been eating.
So reduced cognitive development. But, many years ago, we started adding iodine to salt. So most salt is iodized, and this kind of, fixes that problem. But It's really the ultra processed foods that tend to be the problems, like, snack foods like Twinkies and stuff like that.
So where would we get iodized salt in nature to keep us healthy before? I mean, I'm not sure where that even comes from.
Yeah, presumably our
meat,
Paleolithic selves were eating the right roots and vegetables or whatever. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's the ultra processed foods that we really should be railing against. Technically, something like Beyond Meat is ultra processed, but it's not that simple. It's just a oversimplification to say it's bad because it's processed.
Well, so when I think of processed foods, Brian, I think of losing the nutritional value because of the way it's processed.
Yeah.
I think of added salts.
Yeah.
And I think of added sugars. That's a very common thing too. And, spaghetti sauce and practically everything has sugar that doesn't need it.
No, and as you've said on the show many times before, it's not intended to be health food. Like Beyond Meat is not intended to be health food. It's intended to be a substitute for meat. So, ground beef. So what you really need to compare it against is ground beef. So when you do that, meat substitutes tend to be lower in calories, lower in saturated fat, and higher in fiber. Yes.
Really? Because I thought some of the criticism of these Beyond Meat and what's the other one called?
Yeah, Impossible Burger.
That they were worse than regular meat. Or maybe that's the beef industry saying that.
It can all be tweaked. I mean, it can be whatever you want it to be. So, if they're selling these
things. We're still early stages here, right? I mean, we're still developing
early stages. These. If people are saying, oh, this tastes like crap, well, then they can add in more fat. They can add in more sugar or whatever. So meat substitutes lower in calories and saturated fat and higher in fiber, which is good. To their detriment, some are lower in protein and often contain lower quality protein, meaning they contain less of the essential amino acids that we need.
I didn't know there was different levels of protein. That's something new for me.
Yeah. When it comes to sodium, it's sort of a mixed bag. Substitute burgers tend to be comparable to meat when it comes to sodium. The substitute sausages have less salt than their pork equivalents. A lot of these substitute products are now fortified with B12, iron, and calcium, which is something you're not necessarily going to get from the meat. The Impossible Burger has more B12 and iron than beef does.
Really?
Many plant-based milks are fortified as well. So on balance, they're probably a bit better for your health than the meat equivalent.
And I see this as just a beginning. I see this as, because we talk about the concept of food software, that you can program the food that you're going to be making with precision fermentation in the future. Mm-hmm. We'll be inventing new foods that have protein in them and different tastes and different flavors that don't necessarily come from an animal or a plant. Or we can just tweak the things that are mimicking what we already eat, but to, our taste, to what we like. And chefs, I think, a chef 20 years from now could be a bit of a computer programmer, and just experimenting with different things. And it could be an interesting world.
Well, I've always been fascinated by that. I think I saw a documentary one time about somebody who was a chef at a fast food restaurant. And it's just the idea of that I find interesting. Like somebody has to, even if it's just regular meat and somebody has to design that stuff to be then replicated literally billions of times. It's a fascinating sort of...
It is. And, you go to the McDonald's campus and you see they've got all these chefs making a lot of money there. And every time they come up with a new product, I always think of them. And I think, you stupid buggers, you really screwed up. I'm very disappointed in this wrap that you made, this wrap so that teenagers can put it together when they're hungover and use basic ingredients. And it's just crap. All these chefs are making these things that are disappointing. And, everything that you eat, I was talking to my family about Tim Hortons, what a compromise of a restaurant that is.
Oh, yeah.
Like everything is bad, even the donuts.
Everything.
It's a donut shop and they can't even make a decent donut. I don't want to be the old man here, but when I was a kid, donuts were pretty damn good. They're a lot better than they are there.
No, and even Tim Hortons, it was about 20 years ago, they switched and they forced all of their franchises to buy basically frozen dough or frozen donuts.
Well, they make them in a factory. I've seen the news stories on them. They make them in a centralized factory and they half bake them. So they just finish the baking process in specialized ovens here, which make them somewhat fresh, but not a good. They're not a good product. They're just not.
No, but up until that point, they were made from, they were made in the restaurants and they were slightly better. So there's a couple more issues raised from this article. First, the idea that food processing could alleviate malnutrition for billions of people. So meat substitutes are mostly targeted at wealthy consumers, but the implications of a backlash to processed food are just as harmful for people with less money. More food processing, not less, could improve health and nutrition in developing countries. So there's a lot of countries that can't afford to eat a lot of meat, and in some ways that's good. In other ways, it's bad. There's certain things that you lack in your diet, perhaps, if you're not eating meat, and some of those things could be added, like iodine to salt could be added into the thing. And plus, there's an appetite for people that they may want to eat more meat in countries where they can't afford it. And this gives them an option that is, like that's similar to meat.
If you're new to the podcast, I should tell you that we talk about food on the show because it affects the climate. The new technologies in food are lower carbon. Like Impossible Burger is 25 times less carbon per gram than a hamburger.
No, this is the final point from the article is the carbon footprint. I mean, it's absolutely insane how much lower the carbon footprint is from these substitute food than, regular meat. The environmental toll can be 10 to 100 times lower than beef or lamb, beef being the most carbon intensive.
Yeah.
Came across another one the other day. People often complain about almond milk substitute made of almond because it uses a lot of water. You need tons of water.
And it's growing in places that doesn't have water.
That doesn't have a lot of water. And this is true of the milk substitutes. Almond is the one that uses the most water. But it's like a 10th or 100th of the water needed if you get the milk from a cow. Like the water needed for the beef industry is insane.
See, I would have assumed the opposite. Wow. It's not even close, you're saying. It's
not even close.
Wow. Because I've driven by those almond farms and you see all the irrigation and, you see outside the border, it's a desert. So they're growing them in a desert and you think, wow, that's just not a good idea. But
no, but you see the chart for the carbon footprint and beef is the most carbon intensive of all of the meats. And one last thing here, and again, it's from Our World in Data. There was a really nice graph of meat consumption per person around the world. And so, quick quiz. What country do you think eats the most meat per person?
My initial response would be the United Kingdom or the United States.
It is the United States.
Yeah, that's kind of almost a stereotype.
It's a stereotype that is, it appears to be true. Argentina eats a lot of meat. Australia eats a lot of meat. So in the U.S., it's 124 kilograms per year per person, which is a lot. Canada is down at 82 kilograms, a lot less in Canada. That was surprising to me.
Now, why would that be? We have a lot of agriculture here. We have a lot of land.
Yeah.
Why would we eat
I don't
less
know,
meat?
except I know that anytime I've been to the States and you go to a restaurant and you order a meal in a restaurant, it always seems to be a very, very large portion of meat.
Yeah, a 20-ounce steak for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And
Yeah, but there's a wonderful graph there on Our World in Data, meat supply per person. This is 2017, so the data is a bit out of date, perhaps. But
well, the article is on Wired.com, and I'll put it's called "The World Needs Processed Food." I'll put a link to it in our show notes, and you can check it out there. So the Tesla Semi, according to a tweet by the CEO of Tesla, did its 500-mile trip with a full load. Now, Tesla, a few years ago, announced that it was making an all-electric semi-truck. The CEO of Nikola, who is now like in prison, went on I remember reading his tweets. He was really upset that this was against the law of physics. There's no way you could carry an 18,000 pound load, which is kind of like the load that you want to carry. The Tesla Semi carry this 18,000 pound load.
81,000.
81,000 for 500 miles, which is, Bill Gates said, not possible. I don't know why these people say these things, Brian. Why do they doubt Musk?
Why do they put themselves on the record saying it's not possible? No, lots of people said that at the time, that the Tesla announcement was suspicious because, people didn't think it was possible.
But it's been so long since they made that announcement that battery density, the energy density, the more you can get more energy in the same weight of battery and volume than you could back then. It tends to improve by something like 18% a year. But we're kind of there now, and it sounds, well, we'll know in a couple of days, right? Because on December 1st, they're having an event.
Yeah.
But apparently they've done it, and they've defied it. He's invited Bill Gates to come have a ride. And, I was thinking that would be a fun thing to own. And I know a lot of Tesla fanatics are actually got orders in for the Semi just to have on their driveway. Some YouTube channels, which will be fun. Yeah, definitely fun if they buy one and drive it around, because they're fast. Without a load, they're just really fast and quiet and tall, and just such a weird thing for somebody to own. And probably not that much more expensive than some of the highly spec'd pickup trucks that are out there for $120,000.
Be a couple $100,000, it sounds like. But yeah, we'll learn more on December 1st, and looking to learn more about the charging speeds and the infrastructure and stuff. Yeah,
we'll learn how they plan to do it, but it sounds like this is for real. Now, if it is for real, this is a big deal because there's lots of people making electric semis, but they're making them for shorter scenarios. Okay, they don't have the battery technology or the efficiency that Tesla has with their motors, their inverters, and the way that they have their batteries. And plus, they've just done, pretty serious design with the aerodynamics and everything, and maximized everything they can get in weight. So we'll see. But this is a game changer. A lot of people are saying, the cost per mile is going to be significantly lower, like enough that it'll pull triggers on. A lot of people will pull triggers on it right away once they see the difference in the cost per mile. So it's very interesting. Just
as your Nissan LEAF basically paid for itself with the gasoline savings, these will pay for themselves with the diesel saving.
And I can't, I'd love to, I'd love to have one to pull you could pull an RV, right? There's people talking about that. And I'm sure somebody will make an RV based off the platform. That'll probably take a while, but they'll turn one of these units into just a kick-ass RV, it'll have a massive battery which you can power off the grid and do all kinds of amazing things. Plaster the RV part with the solar panels and charge it up it just seems like a great way to RV, because towing is such a pain in the butt. And, a Tesla Semi or pickup truck, I guess, would do a great job too. But
yeah, so from Power Magazine, the UK government steps up as a 50% owner of the 3.2 gigawatt Sizewell C nuclear reactor. So they've been building this nuclear reactor for a while, planning it. And guess what? It turned out to be more expensive than they expected. So they really needed the government to step in. And the government has stepped in with a £679 million investment. That's $815 million. So yeah, they're going to own half of it from that. But as we've discussed many times, government really has to own these because they are not profitable for any private industry there, especially by the time these get built. And I hate to go on about nuclear. We tend to bash nuclear every episode or so.
Yep.
But, especially by the time this is finished, which will be years from now.
Years.
As we all know, the cost of solar and batteries and wind
My corpse will be cold and dust-like.
So it's already a bad monetary investment now. But that's just going to get worse as time goes on.
And we have a story coming up in the lightning round that says that the cost of uranium is really going up. So that's making the economics of all this very, it's getting worse, I'm afraid. But yeah, private ownership and investment, in nuclear is it's not happening because governments have to do it. And then when governments do it, that makes you and I the investor.
Yeah.
we have to, we're suffering. We're going to waste money because they don't listen to our podcast. If they only listen to our podcast, everyone would be, the world would be a better place.
And there was a story from Japan, too, on Bloomberg. They're looking to extend the life of their 60-year-old nuclear plants, which they were planning to phase out at age 60.
Ooh.
And, you know, keeping nuclear running that we already have is probably a good idea.
But 60 seems a bit pushing
it. It's kind of pushing it, but they're studying it now to see if it's going to be worthwhile.
Okay. Well, I have no problem as long as it's safe of extending nuclear, if that's what it takes. So Electric says that there's more electric bike subsidies coming to the United States. I guess it was in the Inflation Reduction Act, but then it got taken out. Like there was going to be a killer e-bike subsidy that everyone would have got in the States, but that's not there anymore. So individual cities and states have since picked up the slack, they say. Vermont launched the first state incentive program in the U.S. Denver, Colorado also launched a very popular e-bike rebate program that repeatedly sold out, and they had to renew it. New York is now considering its own e-bike rebate, and now we can add Oregon to the list. It could become the latest state. They're talking about $1,200 off an e-bike that costs, well, at least $950. But Brian, that would be free. I mean, my math isn't so good, but if all you have to spend is $950 and you get up to $1,200 off.
Well, I assume if you've spent $950, they'd give you $950. But who
yeah,
knows?
I know, but still, that's free. That's free. That's what I'm saying. It goes to zero.
That's a free bike.
That's crazy. I mean, who wouldn't buy one? I mean, even if you didn't want one, it'd be sitting around the house. And e-bikes are going to be sold. I don't know. They have to do something about that. They can't do 100% of the purchase, but you can get. Maybe they'll, you know, maybe it's prorated. Maybe somebody in Colorado can tell me the details. But also, they would go right up to $1,700 if it's an electric cargo bike. I think I've got a friend in Vancouver who has an electric cargo bike. It's just basically it's a cargo bike not because you're a courier, but because you're living your life off the thing. So you're getting all your groceries and your snowblowers from Walmart. You carry them all on your e-bike. And by the way, it's going to snow in Vancouver. If you're in Vancouver, look out for the snow. It doesn't usually snow there.
Electric cargo bikes are going to be huge. Okay, so Ireland and France are going to connect their electricity grids.
How's that possible, Brian? They're not connected physically.
It's with a giant extension cord.
Really?
Yeah.
Does it go underwater?
It goes underwater. So it is a massive cable that is 575 kilometers long. And so this is the first time that France has been connected to a grid in the UK, and it's for sharing power back and forth between Ireland and France. They're just beginning it now, so it'll be operational by 2026. It'll be 700 megawatts, can go through the cable, which is enough to power 450,000 households. So, I'm just always interested in these kind of stories. We need to make our grids smarter and more interconnected to share the power.
Ireland and France seems like an odd combination. Like, how did these two hook up? Like, and what's going on there? And what would their accent be like?
No, I'm not sure, but I'm just glad to hear it.
Well, it's time for the tweet of the week. Well, the tweet of the week comes from Asad Razuk this week, and he says, building new solar is 3 to 10 times cheaper than operating existing gas-fired power. So you have a gas-fired power in a lot of places in the world. It is cheaper, like the United States, southern United States, 3 to 10 times cheaper to build new solar than to operate the gas.
Yeah.
We're not talking, building gas is building solar. We're talking building a whole new thing is 3 to 10 times cheaper just than existing gas. So if gas funds were invested in renewables, like they're not right at the moment, Europe would get rid of gas by 2028. And this is via PV Magazine that he quotes data from. Well, it is time for the lightning round. Short one for you this week. Brian, General Motors dealerships have repaired thousands of Tesla electric cars, says GM. In its annual Investor Day presentation. I have not heard this before, but apparently people are taking their Teslas to GM dealership. Maybe I could take my LEAF to the GM because they fixed, screw you, Nissan. I'll just take it to the GM dealership.
Yeah, that might work.
I mean, if you could take a Tesla, why couldn't you take a Nissan?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the first I've heard of this.
Something I'm, first spotted on Barron's. A slide in the presentation simply reads 11,180 repairs on Teslas, but they did not elaborate. So GM, Volvo say that EVs won't cost more than gas vehicles by 2025. Both automakers see the Inflation Reduction Act as a key for achieving price parity by mid-decade, despite recent supply chain challenges. So that's good news if true. The UK government will bolster a proposed, that's something we already talked about, so I'm going to skip that. It's time for, what is it time for? A CES, a Clean Energy Show Fast Fact. The International Atomic Energy Agency said 437 nuclear power reactors were operational throughout the world at the end of 2021. 437, and that has a total net capacity of 389 gigawatts. So it's less than a gigawatt per reactor on average. The agency said 56 additional units were under construction. Some of those are in China. Most of those are not other places. And as I said before, uranium prices are on the rise, thus making nuclear even less competitive. And, Russia is partially to thank for that. They're raising the prices of gas and oil and also uranium. So they've screwed everything up. The Department of Energy is to test rapidly deployable portable wind turbines for military use. I remember once we had on the show a story about the military with rapid deployment of solar panels that would sort of be like a transformer and unfold on a portable truck that would give energy into the field. Well, this is good for disaster relief and military use. So disaster relief and military use. A team of 3 labs will use remote communities to study the efficacy of turbines designed to fit into 20-foot shipping containers, perhaps towed by a Tesla Semi. Clean energy jobs now outnumber jobs in fossil fuels, according to a new IEA report. Now, I'm going to continue to keep my eye open for reports like this and studies because it seems like we are at the point now where the transition is happening where the clean energy jobs are way overtaking fossil fuel jobs. So, by the way, France's first offshore wind farm, which is about half a gigawatt, is now fully online. So France has never had an offshore wind farm before. And speaking of offshore wind, our final story this week before we go is Denmark is helping India identify 15 offshore wind zones. And apparently India has some sweet wind zones, Brian. And, they need electricity. We talk about huge solar developments in India. Well, offshore wind is next up on the list, and that will be a huge boon for them.
Nice.
That is our time for this week. It's more than our time. We'd like to hear from you. Please, for God's sake, contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. That is our email address, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Anything that's on your mind, some criticisms, some doubts, some things you like, some things that you're doing, some questions about EV purchases, let us know. We are on social media at the handle @CleanEnergyPod, and we have a YouTube channel which we have special features on. And you can see me looking a bit more sweaty than usual this week. And you can leave us a voicemail, speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. And now, Brian, you can actually donate to the Clean Energy Show, buy us a coffee or a PTC heater using the PayPal link on our website or in the show notes.
Nice.
And if you're new to the show, remember to subscribe. Subscribe on your podcast app because our new shows, they come every week. Because we're machines. We're clean energy machines, and we're here every week. We'll see you next time, Brian.
Yeah, see you next week.